Welcome to the Brainy8 Show, where we talk about all things Salesforce, sharing the coolest features, solutions, and best practices to turn you into a Salesforce rock star. Here's your host, former attorney turned Salesforce consultant and trainer, David Giller.
Hello and happy Tuesday, everyone.
Happy Tuesday.
I am super excited to be here today. I hope you guys are too. For those of you who are in the Northeast, hopefully you're all warm because we've recently had a snowstorm here. And actually, I think another one is coming this weekend. Have you seen that?
Don't say that, David. Don't say that. The snow event that we just had, I'm still recovering.
It's those times when certain family members say, you should move to Florida, you know?
Yes. Or other family members say, will someone please shovel this walk? And you realize that your name is Will Somebody.
Yes, exactly. So I'm super excited to have all of you here with me today. I'm super excited to have Howard, to have you here with me today. I am really excited about the topics that we're going to be talking about. For those of you who are new to the Brainy8 Show Live, so basically this is a weekly show, happens every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, and the show is broken up into 3 segments. The first segment is what I often refer to as the talking head segment, where it's usually describing some type of best practices, some concepts that are relevant to Salesforce professionals. That's about 20 minutes. The second segment, also about 20 minutes, is the screen share segment, where we are showing some kind of how to do something in Salesforce, how to use a certain feature, how to use a particular app, how to create certain kinds of formulas or validation rules or whatever it might be. And then the third segment is open Q&A. Again, about 20 minutes, open Q&A. So any Salesforce related question that you have, feel free to hit us up. Just throw it into the comments and we'll get to it in the last section. But today's topic is super cool because it is so often, I would say probably every Salesforce professional is faced with this conundrum, not once, but many, many times throughout their career, which is when a business is looking for new custom functionality that does not come native out of the box, is it better to build it yourself, or is it better to simply explore an app on the AppExchange, whether the app is free or the app costs money? Which one is better to, we'll use the phrase build versus buy. So that's the first thing that Howard is going to walk us through. And the second one, the second topic is going to be how to supercharge your case management in Salesforce. By the way, it often surprises me to see organizations that are using Salesforce for sales and marketing processes, but when it comes to customer support, ticket management, they're suddenly using spreadsheets. Like, what? I don't get it.
Or Outlook. My favorite thing is when someone says, oh yeah, we just have a shared inbox.
A shared inbox, yes. Oh, yeah. And we use color coding and subfolders to determine the status and who's working on it.
Oh yeah, that's a great way to support your clients. Really efficient. I can guarantee I'm always checking Outlook. Thank God. Wow.
Howard, before we get started, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell everyone like who you are and what you do and where you work and what's going on.
Yes, my name is Howard Yermish. I'm the director of product at Vicasso. Our company used to be called Internet Creations, but we rebranded in the fall. We're now known as Vicasso. We have been building products for the AppExchange since a long time, like 2008, 2009. It's sort of a gray area when we started, because we initially built these products for ourselves because we were Salesforce customers back in 2004. And my responsibility at Vicasso is I direct our product team. So our AppExchange products, the way that they act, the way that we grow them, the way we innovate them, kind of all comes through my team. My team is the team that supports all the products. So we know what we're building and we know what we're supporting. And since our products work generally with client support teams, this is something my children always have a problem explaining, which is, wait, you build software for customer support and you help your customers with your software and you run the customer support team. There's a little bit of that like which thing is your real job? So they usually just say, he's in software. And I'm like, cool. And I'm not the one writing code, so all good now.
Yeah, I think it's funny how so many of us in the Salesforce world are struggling with that, to explain to our non-techie friends, relatives, what we do, because you use the word Salesforce, so they automatically only hear the first part of the first syllable. Oh, so you're in sales. Oh, so you're a sales manager. So I find it very funny how, like, even for myself, a lot of times when someone will ask a question, especially like if we have guests over, especially pre-pandemic, where we had guests over on a regular basis, a big family meal, and one of the guests turns to me and says, so what do you do for David? What do you do for a living? And my whole family, they start rolling their eyes like, oh God, here we
Yes.
go. Conversation's over. Like nobody's going to be able to say anything again. So I take the same approach as you, Howard. I go very generic. I say technology. I work in technology. What kind of technology? And databases. What kind of data? CRM. Really? What kind of CRM? Salesforce. And like, oh, Salesforce. And then everyone's like, yeah, we're done. We're out of here.
Yep. For a brief moment, I was explaining to people, I was like, we develop solutions on the force.com platform. And then I was like, oh, that's even worse. Because then they're like, is that like Star Wars? And no.
Yes.
No.
Then they start asking what kind of language is that and where they can learn it. And yeah, it's all good. All right, let's jump into our first topic. So, to AppExchange or not, when to build versus buy. So what are the things that we should consider, Howard?
So I think the very first thing you should consider is how big of a problem are you trying to solve? And the reason I mention that is sometimes something comes up that is what I would refer to as a very short-lived problem, or something where, you're trying to get, it's a very easy thing. It doesn't have a huge impact. It might be only for a couple of people. So for something like that, you probably want a solution faster than a purchase process. And depending on the size of your organization, you might find that, a couple dedicated afternoons or maybe a couple of weeks gets you to something. So building something tends to make sense because it doesn't have a huge impact. The moment you start impacting lots and lots of people, there's almost a tipping point, not just the number of hours, but the overall user experience becomes something where it's not one person training 2 or 3 other people. It's 50 people needing to be trained with new people cycling in and out. And that custom solution doesn't have the longevity that it necessarily needs because it's not going to be super flexible. There's those kinds of things where you start really thinking, we should find an app for this. That's kind of like the start. For me, that's the starting point of the discussion, is who is going to be affected by this solution? Is it a lot of people or just a couple people?
Yeah, so understanding the scale and the magnitude those are definitely really important factors to consider, because to your point, if it's not affecting a whole lot of people within the organization, it's only affecting 2 people and it's a temporary issue versus, and by the way, we're not minimizing, like, okay, it could be one person, like the number of employees within that demographic within the organization does not automatically equate to level of importance, but we're trying to gauge the level of pain and disruption that this problem is causing if left unattended is important to somehow gauge, to prioritize. So if it's something that's it's very temporary, and it's really not that impactful, it's sort of a want to have, not really need to have, like, those are a lot of the considerations, honestly, to even figure out how high it should be on the priority list. How soon should we even look into it? How much, in terms of time or resources, should we dedicate to solving this thing? Very important, and people often forget about it.
I think what's also really important, you mentioned resources. Some companies absolutely have a technology team that's got developers, a technology team that has Salesforce admins, that has that diverse set of skills that could build something. So you then have to think to yourself, is this so unique to our business that there's a solution that there's no solution possible out there, that we are literally designing this thing for us because this is so, like, whether it's proprietary, it's just something that no other business would absolutely have. But then you come into something that's like, oh, we need a system for credit card processing. And I'm using an example of something that, we don't touch from our own apps. But credit card processing is something where it's like, could you work directly with the different APIs? And like, you could absolutely build yourself a credit card processing system. And then you think to yourself, cool, and what if it doesn't work perfectly? What are we impacting? So the second half of that discussion for me is the cost of it not working properly. Who is going to be yelling at you? So imagine you build this system and now you're getting finance yelling at you because every one of the charges isn't going through properly. Compliance is yelling at you because the data is not being secured properly. Like, all of these different things happen. And then you see a third-party solution where it's like, oh, we could pay, 0.25% per transaction, and that would be our credit card solution. And you're like, hang on a second. That handles my compliance, that handles my data security, that handles the quick and easy rollout. When they add new payment systems, we can support those by clicking a checkbox. We don't have to recode to a third API. Oh, now they want to do two-factor authentication. Oh, it's just a checkbox. Like, when all of a sudden you're buying a product and you're like, okay, the cost isn't wonderful, except if we had to maintain it to do all of those things. And the ability to get support and the ability to get new features and the ability to have things maintained for you, that's a value that sometimes people don't remember when they're like, I'm going to build a cool thing for my org. It's like, yeah. And in 3 years, when you forgot what you did, how much in the mood are you going to be to fix it and to rebuild it and to, lose 3 months or 6 months or 3 years trying to figure out how all of those things work, let alone the stakeholder who's then on you saying, why can't we make this work? Didn't you build this originally? And you're like, yes, 3 years ago, we have totally different requirements and 9 changes have happened since then. And I honestly can't figure out how it works anymore. Like, that's a very real thing when trying to maintain your own product. And I know this because we maintain 7 paid applications that all have this thing, and that's all we do is focus on maintaining those products. So it's very hard to do when that's all you do.
That is, Howard, that is an incredibly important point. And it also holds true for, honestly, and I'm not, I'll rephrase that. We, both Howard and for the audience, both Howard and I are not trying to discourage anyone from building anything. Also not trying to discourage anyone from introducing customizations that your organization needs to operate as a business. But the concepts that Howard just touched on, which is the business requirements change, or the platform needs change, or some compliance or regulatory things, issues that we need to be compatible with, we need to follow certain processes, change, and then someone magically expects that whatever either we built in an app or even native Salesforce customizations we've introduced, by the way, it could be something as simple as a formula field or a validation rule that we introduced in Salesforce, that's not magically updated to comply with the new law that went into effect at the first of the month or the first of the year. The system has no way of magically knowing any of that or getting updated. So it does require ongoing maintenance. And keep in mind, the variations, anything that we build, the simplest field, a page layout, a formula field, what could be way smaller than an app. There could be 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, 2 years from now, internal business requirements that change. A new employee comes on board. That new employee happens to be the head of sales. We have a new process. We have new ways of doing things, new data that we care about. So whatever was built before needs to be updated to comply with that. So there are internal process changes. There are external changes, like I hinted at before. It could be some new laws, new regulations that we're not even excited about these new changes, but because of the industry that we're in, because of the geographic location that we're located in, we are forced to comply with these laws. Therefore, we have to adjust accordingly. And there could also be technology changes. So one thing you mentioned before, and it's a great example, by the way, that you mentioned before, which is credit card processing. So there could be something that, let's say, I'm just I'm not trying to pick on them. I'm just using them as an example. Stripe as a credit card processor. There are several of them. So it could be Stripe changed something in the way they operate, the way they handle the data. And it could be just for one field. It's suddenly encrypted. It used to not be encrypted anymore. And now because of that one change, the integration needs to get updated. Otherwise, it's broken. Even for just one field, it's broken. Or it could also be a Salesforce platform change. And as all of us know as Salesforce professionals, there's a whole lot of those changes happening on a regular basis. Many people have been commenting about turning on multi-factor authentication. And I think this is actually a very fitting example. Multi-factor authentication and some integrations no longer work once they turn on multi-factor authentication. And when reaching out to the Salesforce support team to troubleshoot, because the assumption for every Salesforce professional, the assumption is, okay, I did something wrong in the way I turned on multi-factor authentication. What the heck did I do wrong? It's all brand new, so help me figure it out. And turns out this is something that Salesforce still has to work on. So the response really is simply bypass either roll it back, turn off multi-factor authentication, or don't enforce it for these apps, these users, whatever it might be. And so my point is, there are many of us assume that when we're going to introduce something new, a new app, a new an updated piece of functionality in Salesforce, it's not going, we're not going to have to maintain it. Like, that's it. The business was abundantly clear on what they need. Like, they're so sure of themselves that we're never going to have to go back and update it. And inevitably, someone will. You might not have to. It might be the person who comes after you who will have to do it. But
I almost feel like we need to embroider that on a pillow. The business requirements were abundantly clear. Like, what? When does that happen? When do the business requirements stay consistent through the course of a 6-month project? There will always be some change. And I think what's really interesting, and you talked about this a little bit in terms of like those apps that are integrated with Salesforce, where they're not running on Salesforce, they're talking to Salesforce. And that whole process, that's something that I don't want to say they're not true believers, but I really believe that the more your functionality can just run on the Salesforce platform, especially when you're thinking in that, should I build versus buy? If you can buy something that runs in the Salesforce platform and isn't just talking to the Salesforce platform, you can then customize it in the most powerful ways, because you now have access to the data model that AppExchange product, that native AppExchange product, not integrated, native. When you do that natively, you can leverage everything that you're trying to do, every process, every field that's in there, everything that you have access to. All of a sudden you can launch flows. All of a sudden you can schedule report. Like, you could do all the things that you want to do because that app works in Salesforce, not near Salesforce with a little signifier saying, here's our data, at an integration point, so that's a pet peeve of mine when someone says, oh, Salesforce app. And I'm like, you're not native. And I kind of, remind people that it's like,
it's a webhook, dude. It's just a webhook through native. Zapier.
Yes, exactly.
I'm not knocking it. You could get a lot done with that, but
yes, you
like,
can.
Don't call it an app.
Absolutely. And I think those kinds of things where we often, as app vendors, we run into this really interesting decision, which is, if this is better done with Salesforce itself, like our product is doing certain things, but like, we don't want to rebuild flow inside of our app, but we might want to create something that's easy to work with using flow, or we might want to do something that says, look, every one of our clients is going to do this process. So rather than give them like documentation that says, here's how to build it in flow, we're just like, look, we're just going to build that into the product. We're going to make it a checkbox. We're going to make it easy to configure. And we're going to do things so that it's really easy for you to then use what we do to leverage your own automation, so that our product gets better because you have Salesforce knowledge, as opposed to our product's in a black box and it shows up over here in Salesforce and you're kind of happy. I love it when someone says, oh, we took what you did in case flags or email to case premium. we took that and then we launched our own stuff. And that allowed us to do X, Y, and Z. That's when I'm just like, oh yes, we are on the right track as an app vendor. That's how I know we're getting it right.
That is very cool. And I agree with you. To me, it's all about empowering others. So long as what we added into the mix helped you to take it to the next level and solve problems in a better way, that's a win-win.
Yeah, it really is. I often think about it this way. The experience of your Salesforce users. So when you're thinking, hey, I'm an admin and I've got to make sure that the people using Salesforce are really, really like up to speed and fluent and stuff like that, the more kinds of systems that they have to bounce around and look at, the harder it is to get them on board, to get them to have good habits, to get them to be trained properly, to be consistent, let alone improve data quality in the mix. Like, just think, oh, data quality. How many organizations really have great data quality standards? They may have some compliance things, so they have to do it, but data quality is always an issue in so many different things. So now take functionality and hide it somewhere so that they have to go someplace else, and then Salesforce can see a part of it. The other thing I often look at is, do you really want your data in 3 places? Like Salesforce has your data, and then you have another application out there that's all its own stuff. That's like, oh, well, we have a survey product. So this is a sore subject. Many clients who don't buy our survey tool have their data in at least 2 places, one in the survey tool, and then another in Salesforce. Now they've got 2 things that they have to handle, let alone 2 sets of users in terms of data visibility and sharing and what they can do. And we're like, we just leverage the Salesforce platform. So if you have rules for sharing and visibility, we respect that. It's like that kind of native approach to app building means you get to have a hybrid approach as opposed to hey, is it just build versus buy? Or is it really that combination of the two, so that those same skills that make you valuable to your company, you're using to customize the apps that you buy so that they are even more of a fit for your organization.
Very true. And I actually have a question for you, which is surveys actually happens to be a really good example. You touched on having Salesforce, this ideal world of having, and if I'm putting words in your mouth, correct me if I'm wrong, of having Salesforce be the centralized place where all of the data resides. And surveys is actually one really good example where most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time, when most businesses are executing on surveys, it's in relation to sales processes, lead qualifying leads, which is part of sales processes, marketing related, or customer support related. However, there are other scenarios where businesses could be leveraging surveys that are not tied to any of those things, and they're not necessarily tied to any Salesforce, any person or organization that's represented in Salesforce. So let's say, for example, a company is doing an anonymous poll to get feedback on different designs on a new logo or a new product name or something like that, where sure, they're capturing the feedback, they're capturing the responses. Sure, it's tied to a marketing initiative, but it's not tied to a particular individual or company as the respondent, where then it starts to beg the question of, does it make sense to store it in Salesforce? Or maybe it's an employee-related survey and the company does a lot of those. And we're talking about employees that are not necessarily using Salesforce. They have no need to use Salesforce. They're out in the field and they're installing solar panels on roofs, and they're never expected to be logging into Salesforce for all kinds of reasons. So what recommendations would you have for a company that's sort of looking to balance that out? And by the way, surveys just happens to be one example. Yeah. I find the exact same thing happens very, very often when it comes to file storage and file sharing. And I have a very different approach, which we can certainly touch on as it relates to that. But I wanted to get your thoughts on evaluating what happens when some of it is outside of the scope of Salesforce?
So one of the things that's I've always felt Salesforce is strong because it is business transactions, and whether they're internal processes, external processes, customer facing, what have you. So from that survey analogy, I always think about it is, are you doing a transactional survey that is you need feedback on something that is a process that you are going to repeat? It is literally every day of the year or every week of the year. You're going to be doing the same things, and you're looking to improve that process over time. Those kinds of transactional surveys, you want the data about those surveys to be reportable. You want to show change over time. You might want to slice it to say, with these services, we get surveys that look like this. With these other services, we get lesser good surveys. Someone mentions a particular word in the comments whenever you're using a certain product. Whatever those things are, you want to be able to report on it or see those improvements over a long time. And then you have what I'll call a campaign survey, where for a moment in time, you want lots of people to comment on one thing, but 3 weeks after that, that's no longer interesting. That kind of campaign survey isn't really well suited for creating fields in Salesforce, creating dashboards in Salesforce. It's not trying to do those things. So those kinds of campaign feedback things, you don't necessarily want the equivalent reporting functionality or automation launching functionality. Like if someone gives you a low score on a survey on your case management process, you probably want to create a task for a manager to look at the case to say, what's going on, to reach out to the client. You want to do that. That's something that Salesforce is excellent at. If you want to have something that just says, how are we doing? And you ask all of your clients in April, one day in April, they get a survey. Every client you've ever had says, how did we do for you? That's a really weird thing to deal with from a transactional model. It's more of like, okay, well, people told us they liked us. Okay. Think about transactional as this is relevant to the time, as opposed to just out of the blue, you've asked people, do you like me still? And that's, Salesforce does the transactional very, very well. It's well suited for that. Where the market research kind of surveys, which aren't transactional, I don't want to say Salesforce is the wrong place for it. You have to be real careful about what you use one tool or another. You want to know how you want to survey before you put a requirements doc together that says our survey tool should do this.
Yeah. So I think in the end, what you're really pointing out is it's critical that when you're exploring introducing either custom functionality or an app in Salesforce, to ask the bigger picture, to get a better understanding of the holistic processes around this thing. When someone says, hey, how do we do surveying within? Does Salesforce have survey functionality? If not, how can we introduce survey functionality? The answer should not be yes, and here are the apps that can do that, or yes, here's how we can build it natively. The answer should be, what is it that you're trying to do as it relates to surveys? What kind of surveys are you looking to do? And based on within what context are you looking to do surveys? And by the way, surveys is actually another really good example, because when it comes down to it, we might be thinking like with the primary term of surveys, but when it comes down to it, what is an RSVP, invite? It's a survey. It's a form. And when someone fills out, I want to sign up for your newsletter, what's that? It's a form, which is a sibling of a survey. So chances are it's the same tool that can handle all of those things.
It is really one of those things. And like when I think about how we build stuff, we are always kind of like, we're kind of like customer number one. If we don't see how we would use it, it's hard for us to really understand the problem, even when our clients come to us. So we often think about things that way. But then it gets down to like, how can we simplify the problem itself so that we can position ourselves well? So like our product Simple Survey, clients of ours will often say, can I use this? And they will give us an example that is very much like filling out a medical form. So they'll want the ability for someone to save their progress, to be able to say, I want to answer 30 questions and then come back to it tomorrow and answer 30 more questions. And I'm sitting there going, oh my God, why would you torture someone with a survey with 60 questions? That's crazy. Because we've thought about our product as This is purpose built for transactional surveys so that you get one-click feedback, and if the end user has time, will give you some additional answers to those questions. And it's always that in the moment feedback. So the concept of someone saying, can you make your tool into a form tool? I'm like, it wouldn't be called Simple Survey, would it? It would be a different tool. We might use some of the same technology, but when we present this sort of, I'll call it a one question per page, it's a really nice mobile optimized, easy to tap. I did a demo a couple years ago where I was answering the survey with my nose. I was just taking my phone and being like, I can question A, question B. Like, it was just very easy to take. That approach to the survey tool is not designed if you want to sign a document or upload your, a W-2. Like, if you're trying to do that kind of form experience, the requirements are different. So the app that we build is going to be different because we're trying to solve a key job that needs to get done. And it's so funny because, like, the jobs to be done framework, it's something that Salesforce uses. And so, as we incorporate that into our own processes, there's almost this like, okay, here's a feature request. Is that our product? Because sometimes it's not. And if it's not, having the discipline to say no to it is really hard, because, man, that client is staring you in the face and they've got wads of cash and they're throwing it at the screen. They're like, take my money now. And you're like, we're not the right solution for that. It's also something that when you are, and to kind of wrap up our build versus buy conversation, when you're having that, you should find an app that fits. And if it's not, and if it doesn't fit or it's not designed to solve those business problems, keep looking, because something else is out there. And look, I think our apps are amazing. The reason I do is because I'm in them every single day. But we get clients who ask us for features and functionality, and I'll look at it and go, you know what? I've been at this company for 6 years, almost 6 years in April. I've never heard anyone ever make that request, and that sounds like torture for your users. Please don't do that. And it's funny because some of the people on my team know that I have said things on the phone with clients where I'll say, okay, well, I just threw up in my mouth. Please don't do that to your end users. Like, I'm very upfront with our clients that way, because I want them to know that when I say, yes, our product is the right fit, that I mean it, that I'm not just saying, I'm not selling them a product because I want their revenue. Now, mind you this, I have children who are one of them's in college right now. I like it when I get paid. So obviously we want we want to get that client. We want the revenue from that. But if we're not the right option, it's going to come back and they're not going to stay with us, and they're going to try to make it work, and they're going to try to fit things in. It's just not going to work well, because the way we see the product, the way we have a vision for its long-term growth, isn't fitting with what your company wants. So really consider, what is the long-term growth of this product? Because that's going to help me know, hey, as my business grows, this product will grow with me and will introduce those features and that functionality, as opposed to something that was like, the last update on the AppExchange was 2013 and it kind of works, but you go to the documentation link and it's broken. Like, really make sure that if you're going to buy a product, that you've got a company that's got support, that's got people helping you, even if they've got a sales team that won't leave you alone. Our sales team is very nice. We are friendly that way, but like, you want a company that's actively engaged and interested in your growth as well as the product's growth itself.
Some really important points. And honestly, even the point that you made earlier regarding the entire conversation, I should say, that we had, and once we wrap this up, we'll switch gears to the next topic, because we need to be mindful of the time, of the survey functionality, which then quickly turns into having someone digitally sign something at the end, the completed survey/form. And then usually once it's signed, we want to be able to have the identity of the person who signed it, the date and time that they signed it, go back into Salesforce onto the appropriate record that triggered the form or survey going out, probably want to convert it into a PDF and perhaps sent as a confirmation to the person who sent it out. So going back to the core topic, which is AppExchange or not, when to build versus buy. When someone asks you something like, hey, do we have survey functionality in Salesforce? And you start Googling it, and whether you're finding the new native functionality that Salesforce is providing or any app that's on the AppExchange, it goes back to the importance of asking the bigger picture of what is the process around it? What is it that we are looking for in this thing that you're asking me about? What is it that we're expecting to do? What are the steps that will happen before this new thing kicks in? So let's make believe wave the magic wand and it's live. What happens before it? For whom? What happens after? What is it that we want and need? Because for you, as the Salesforce, let's make believe you're the Salesforce admin, Salesforce professional who's given an unlimited budget. You go down the road of purchasing any app. I'm not even going to name one because it really doesn't even matter. You choose any single app that's out there, the one that has the best ratings, the one that where the AEs impressed you the most, the one that gave you the best pricing, whatever it is. And then 2 weeks later or 2 months later, the business turns to you and says about, hey, what about the digital signatures? What about having this other platform that we're using should kick off at the end of a webinar? Everyone who attended the webinar should automatically get the survey. And how do we turn it into a QR code? And all of a sudden you're faced with brand new requirements and you're left with, oh, those are really good questions. Maybe I should have asked that before I swiped the credit card and installed that thing that, and so we're not knocking whatever option you chose. It's just you yourself want for your own career success. You want to position yourself not as the person who installed the app that was asked for. You want to position yourself as the person who introduced solutions to the business problems in a way that is scalable and flexible and sustainable.
I'm going to reemphasize flexible and sustainable, because those are things that, look, there are developers, we work with them because they have to document our code and stuff like that, that really put forward great practices so that any of our developers can work on our products and we rotate stuff around. But it's hard. Over time, the same developer who documented it and commented and looks at it is going like, wow, there's a so much better way to do this. And in order to make the app faster, we're going to just rewrite this. And when it's your own solution, if someone said you're going to get no business benefit other than it's going to be a little bit faster, for us as an app vendor, a little bit faster is a big benefit to all of our clients. For you as a purpose-built solution for your org, that little bit of effort that might take you 3 months, where you haven't impressed any of your stakeholders, it's just that your end users aren't complaining quite as much. That's a really hard thing to stomach. That is definitely a thing where you just have to kind of like take to heart, what's it going to be like to live with this? And sometimes the right answer is build it. Sometimes when you find that app on the AppExchange and it just works and you're like, yeah, $20 per user per month. That seems a little expensive, but they've got more than 20,000 hours of development poured into it, and they've got active support, and it works. And this other thing that someone mentioned, there's a checkbox for that. Like my favorite phrase on client calls, they'll ask a question, and I'll say, oh my goodness, I have a checkbox for you. And they just start laughing, and they're like, oh, and then I click the little checkbox, and they've got the feature enabled, and they're like, our users have been asking for this for years. You mean there was one checkbox that all I had to do was that? I'm like, that was it. One checkbox. You're good.
Great. Then you look like the superhero because others have thought of it because you went through the business pain points, the processes before you implemented it. And that's what it comes back to in the end.
Yeah.
All right. Let's switch over to the next topic, which is the screen share.
Ooh,
how to supercharge your case management. Yes.
All right. Well, so to provide some context, I'm going to show you a little bit about our product, Case Flags. Case Flags is a product that it's designed to help you prioritize which cases you should work. So, but I want to not just show you Case Flags because that's not what we're here for. I want to show you a little bit about how we think about supporting our apps and also demoing our apps. So right now I have this org, this is a little demo org, and you'll notice in here, I've got one case. So I've got this little case here. It's got, a thing on it. It says, this is my case. It's low priority. It's even telling me that Case Flag says, oh, here's the next flag. The next flag is going to turn this little hourglass and then the little warning and then the flames. It's giving you a sense of time. So what Case Flags is doing is it's helping you prioritize. And I have this great little utility bar component that lets me see which cases I should work next. But the thing about this org is right now, there's literally one case in this org. And if I wanted to show off prioritization, I can't just show it with one case. I have to show it with a lot of cases. So our development team built us this fun little tool that says, I want to show all kinds of things. So I'm going to point this at our switchboard, which is a functionality in case flags, which I can't show with one case because it's only got one thing. I'll point it at one particular switchboard view. I'll say, you know what, make like 85% of my cases flagged. We have this little offset field in case you're doing the demo like later today. I could pre-populate some fields on it. So I'm going to look for my little case reason here, and I'll just randomize the answers and populate like 80% of it. Cool. And I'll pick an import that I did. I uploaded this, I guess, yesterday. So I'll do that. And now it's going to import about 50 or so cases into my org. And so it's showing me here, hey, this is what the import did. Very, very cool. But now if I go and I look at my all open cases, hey, that whole thing just got crazy. My utility bar component, and I got to do a little queues thing here. So there's the stuff in my queues. That got crazy. But what's even better is now if I was going to show functionality that's our switchboard, instead of having to manually set all of these different cases so that I could do things like set them at different times and dates and stuff like that, make the flags work at different colors and ranges, I can actually just populate this org ready to go. So now I give a demo and I say, okay, what I want to do is I'm going to find just the people who are in shift number 1, and I'm going to rebalance their work. So I'm going to deselect that. I'm going to deselect that. So I'm just looking, here's my shift number 1 for my support queue. And now case flags lets me just drag and drop onto that shift, and it's going to start balancing the workload. So this is a problem that's really hard to demonstrate unless you have a tool to do this. So our R&D team comes to us and says, look, when you're demoing your products, what are the kinds of things that you need to be able to do that? And so we kind of, we laugh and we're just like, well, we don't need just a data importer. We actually need something that simulates a real live situation so that when someone says, well, how do I balance workload? It randomizes stuff in a nice way. And, you then dive in and say, okay, what's in my case flags? What's in my cases? So I now start working cases and it's like, great, I'm going to go to the worst offending flag. It's red. It's screaming for help. I can go to that and now work through the process. So I clear the flag, our utility bar updates. Like I can give a really good demo, next case, work through this. Let's say I sent an email to that client, flag gets cleared, next up. So now I can show a real world what a support team would need to do to prioritize their work based on all kinds of different things. Now, that's sort of like, I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of a like, hey, this is case flags. But the thing that I want to show you, not just in case flags, and case flags is very cool in terms of the kinds of things that are in the setup. But as an admin, going through documentation, trying to figure out what feature does what kinds of things are there, it's often very difficult to kind of follow your way through stuff. What does this mean? How do I do this? So we say, look, we have different audiences for our products. The end users who use it. So the support agent who's like, okay, which case should I work on next? Let me see if there's something in a queue that I should work. Oh, this case is there. I'll jump in the queue, or I'll just work on my cases. That support manager who might be working in the switchboard, who's like trying to triage things. What's going on with my team? How do I know that everyone's getting the cases that they should work? Let me give this over to Kristen. Hello, Kristen, in case you're there. Let me make sure that like everything's balanced. Like Kristen's work is way out of balance. Like being able to make those decisions is really great. The admin experience of our products is something where if that isn't good for people, it's going to be hard to get this end user adoption because the admins aren't even bought in. They can't take advantage of all those features. So I'm actually going to switch over to another one of our products. And the reason I do that, and this is for our product, Email to Case Premium. Email to Case Premium probably has like 200 different settings. Now, that's a lot of settings. There's a lot of features and functionality. So when we talk build versus buy, I sort of joke, I'm just like, good luck building what Email to Case Premium can do, because there are so many features that this product does that if you had a business requirement that was like, well, we want to make sure that when a case is closed, that a client can't email to an old case and reopen that case. So we have a feature specifically for that. Could you purpose build yourself a solution to just that problem? Sure. But if you said, you know what, we have this feature called time closed until new case creation. I just start typing in time closed. I click the answer and it zooms me over to that setting. So I could say, oh, instead of never, I want to make it so that if the case has been closed for, let's say, 4 days, it's going to set it and make a new case. So if the case is closed for 4 days, it'll create a new case if the client replies. These are the kinds of things where I want to do something with like, I don't know, something along the lines of like, how about like a forward to case? So I start typing in the word forward and it's like, oh, enable forward to case, set the addresses here. Let's turn that on, jump over to that setting. And now I could turn it on, adjust the markers, add different things. Like the ability to quickly navigate the setup experience. That's something that if you are going to purpose build a solution for yourself, yes, it gives you job security, but realistically, it's just too much to try to build this kind of experience so that you can meet different business requirements. Because those business requirements, as they change, and they will, someone says, okay, we have all these forward to case markers here. Well, all of a sudden we have a support team in another country. So the forward to case markers are different. So, oh, well, how do we do that? Well, if you've purpose built it, you may have just made yourself like, maybe you wrote some Apex code that included these things. So now you're editing Apex and deploying that code and trying to work through all the unit tests and stuff like that. Here, you add a row that just says like, oh, I want to make it so that if I put in the word forward, like I can just add that setting and then save the setting and now it's ready to go and it's working right now. I mean, like to me, that's so much easier than trying to edit just one simple workflow rule or process builder or flow or code. Being able to manage it here, that's kind of like, that means that you as an admin can be super duper powerful. So that's kind of the end of my show and tell here, unless people have specific questions about it. I didn't want to make this a commercial about our apps other than our apps do a lot of really cool things, but that kind of approach.
It's all good. This is some very cool stuff. We do have a couple of questions. So we do have some questions that came in live right now, and we do have a couple of questions that folks asked me in advance. So let's switch over to Q&A mode. Ta-da! So Tim actually has a question. Let me throw it on the screen right over here. Tim's question is actually a really good one. Best practices, it's not necessarily case related. Best practices for recurring tasks. Our sales reps are now required to send out a mailer every month, make 25 calls to people that have not done business in over a year, visit clients, etc. Howard, you go first. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. If you have any, you can feel free to pass it right back to me. I definitely have a lot of thoughts.
I was going to defer right to you for this one.
All right. I have a lot of thoughts on this. So first of all, let's sort of back it up. Tasks, managing tasks in Salesforce. Salesforce is a great tool to manage tasks. However, it could easily turn into a beast very, very quickly. I can't tell you if I had a nickel for every time I worked on a project where a business leader basically said, I want to automate the creation of tasks. And I usually respond with, oh, really? What are the criteria? Based on, if this, then that kind of mentality. Based on what criteria should these tasks get created? What details are associated with the tasks? Who should they get assigned to? What is the due date, etc.? And of course, they always describe everything as being very black and white. We go ahead, wave the magic wand, we introduce the automation, and it's live. And that's when we start to realize, oh yeah, it doesn't really apply in all of these situations. There are many situations where the due date should be either earlier or later. And very quickly, data gets bulk updated or inserted into Salesforce, triggering the same rules. So suddenly as a rep, I get thousands of new tasks that are assigned to me. So very, very quickly, usually this happens within weeks, not months, that all of the sales reps who are getting assigned these automated tasks essentially throw their hands up in the air. They give up on everything associated with tasks. They're no longer using tasks. They're now using something like Outlook or Notepad or anything besides Salesforce. So this is not because of a flaw in, I'm not trying to blindly defend Salesforce. This has nothing to do with the way Salesforce functionality was designed around tasks. It's just imagine for a single task, let's say there's a one task, which is, and Tim, I am going to get to your question. I'm sorry. I just need to get this out there because it definitely applies wholeheartedly. For a single task, which is, let's say, follow up, call the client, call the prospect. I need to do a few things. First, I need to actually find their phone number, get on the phone with them, take notes. I need to maybe refresh my own recollection on whatever it is that I'm talking to them about. I need to take notes during that conversation to capture the essence of the phone call. I need to capture my own notes of what are the follow-up items that I promised to this person or that I need to do. Maybe I need to follow up with my manager, follow up with a colleague to get the information that this person asked for. And then I need to go back into that task to mark it off as completed. That's a lot. That's a lot of steps. And none of them are because Salesforce is clunky. It has nothing to do with Salesforce being clunky. So now we take this situation that Tim brought up and expand on that. And now basically we're saying, let me put it back on the screen over here. So we're saying that on a regular basis with some cadence, once a month, the reps are expected to follow all of these steps. I am not saying stay away from tasks because they suck. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying think very carefully before you automate anything associated with tasks. So the way I would do this, I always prefer to not use tasks when possible. It's not always possible to avoid using tasks. When it's appropriate, simply have the equivalent of a checklist of reminders on a particular record for people to follow up with. Or alternatively, this is actually a great scenario to leverage the native out-of-the-box campaign functionality. What I would do is this: once a month, and by the way, you could, at the beginning of the year, you create 12 campaigns and you're done. Those campaigns are created. All you need to do now is add people into the campaign. You could also run a flow that on the 29th, 30th, 31st of the month to automatically review all of the records that you have in Salesforce to determine who should get added into the next month's campaign. And then what I would do is these different milestones, Tim, that you're calling out in terms of the stages, the process, the phases of this process, I would set those as campaign member statuses. So this way we would know who is it that got, so by the way, the first, talking about campaigns and campaign members, almost always, 99% of the time, when I'm creating a new campaign, the default status should be, almost always, the default status should be added to campaign. That's the first status, because all that means is this individual was added to the list. No mailer went out. No one placed a phone call. Nobody sent an email. Nobody did anything yet. They're waiting in the queue to be processed. So I would have the appropriate statuses. So again, pulling it back up on the screen. The first one I would have is added to campaign. The second status I would have is mailer sent. The third one would be client visit, and determine what are the other statuses we would have. This way you could see for any rep as well as the sales leader, you could see for each member of the each sales team member who's expected to, I should be careful using the word member because we're talking about campaign members. For each member of the sales team who's expected to follow up on these things, you basically have a report that shows for this campaign, I want to see all of my campaign members by the contact owner, and I want to see it then grouped by the campaign member status. And you can easily see the progress of what's going on over there, how effective your team members are in terms of getting through the entire list for that particular month. And you can also compare month over month. It is an incredibly easy, flexible, scalable way of handling it. So that's what I personally would do.
The only nuance that I'd add to that,
Yep.
I have one simple thought, which is in developing the requirements, I'd figure out if there is a very low tech, like I can build you a system in 5 minutes if you pay attention to a report, and use that to suss out the rest of the requirements. So to say, look, before I actually build this solution, even if you know, like we could troubleshoot it, we could get it there in about 2 days of effort, but let's do a 15-minute report. And let's see if we can develop the habit in this team, because they're going to come up with stuff. They're going to come back and they're going to say 25 is too many. Or, you know what, we could do 25 a week, not 25 a month, depending on the nature of the team. So really figuring out what you can do to right size that overall project, because you might find something comes up in that first 3 months. And in that 3 months, you realize there's a big key requirement that's like, oh, well, that's a change that we weren't aware of. But now that we did that low-tech version, we started seeing a result, we could validate that to the business. So it made sense for us to spend, whether it's time or money, solving it. I'm a real big fan of that low tech, almost sneaker net approach to hitting technology to figure out all of those questions that someone's going to come up with to say like, oh, well, in this scenario, is there a way we can do this? That would be the one nuance I would add to that.
I couldn't agree more. Yes, you're spot on, 100%. And I apply that model by asking a client, anytime a client is asking for any kind of automation, I beg them, please, let's go through the process of first doing it manually before we set it on autopilot. And you, the client, you are going to be the one to tell me when you're ready to put it on autopilot. If you're insisting that we do put it on autopilot immediately, fine, because sort of to your point, as a consultant, as a Salesforce consultant, if you're going to have me do work and then rework to redo because your business requirements changed because you didn't think it through, I'm going to end up charging you more, because if I'm charging by the hour, that's more work for me to do, even though I'd rather do it the more efficient way, the right way the first time. That's why I'm asking you to make sure, vet your requirements before you ask me to do anything. So I always encourage clients to try to do it the low-tech way first, to confirm what their business requirements really are, to look for all of those exceptions so that when we do put it on autopilot, it doesn't frustrate everyone on the team, because then you're doing cleanup. You have to not only redo the work, you have to reteach everyone on the team how to do it the newer way, not the way we taught you last week. We're going to do it the new way for this week. And then we're going to find another way to do it next week. So it becomes really frustrating for everyone. We do have a question here from Kim for you.
Oh boy.
Does case flags allow you to distribute cases from a queue, or just redistribute within the team?
The answer is yes. I could actually show you exactly what I'm talking about in the switchboard. This is sort of one of the cool things that we can do.
You want to go back to the screen share?
Sure. This is an easy one to answer. So boom. So what I'm doing here is I have a number of cases in the queue. They're all at different stages of the game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, you know what, I want to assign these to people in my shift 1 group here. And that's a group, and you can define the groups however you want. So I'm just making it so you're only going to see the shift 1 group and this queue. And I'm going to start by saying, let me look at the cases that are, let's just start with our red flag cases. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that the right person is set up to work that case. So I'm going to assume that, like, Howard only has 6 flag cases and Christina has 8 flag cases. So intuitively, I'm thinking Howard's probably going to get the case, because if you look at these little workload bars, it looks like I'm the one with the least amount of work. So in fact, yes, it was assigned to me. I got that case. If I do another one, it will probably be assigned to a different person on the team. In this case, nope, I got them both because of my workload was not nearly as bad. But if I then scale that back a little bit and start distributing them out, I'm just dropping them onto the shift, and it's making decisions based on workload as to who should get which case to try to do that balancing act for you based on, how long has the client been waiting for a response. So there's my little quick demo of getting that workload balance from the queue.
That is great stuff. Thank you. We are at the top of the hour, so even though we do have a couple of other questions that folks submitted, we don't have enough time to get to them now, so hopefully we'll get to them another time. Howard, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for sharing your insight and your wisdom. This is great stuff.
My pleasure.
Awesome. See you all next week. Bye-bye.